So, good evening, everyone. I see a lot of people are joining us this evening. Welcome, welcome. My name is Jamie Seward. I'm Associate Director of Affinity Engagement Programs with the Office of Alumni Relations. I'm here with our special guests, Dr. Jed Galen, Music Director of the Hopkins Symphony Orchestra, and Amy Beth Horman, award-winning violinist. This evening, we'll have the special opportunity to listen to Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto while we discuss the work with Jed and Amy Beth. Now, before I turn the program over to our speakers, I encourage you to ask questions in the Zoom Q&A located at the bottom of your screen. Now, I'd like to turn the program over to Jed and Amy Beth.
Well, thanks, Jamie. Amy Beth, so great to see you. Good to have all of you with us. We have a really exciting program today, and with one work, the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, and Amy Beth and I were saying what an incredible piece it is. It's a piece that many violin students learn, but that, and we'll get more into this later, but that has intense challenges because it's so finely wrought, and it's passionate, and yet at the same time it never loses its poise. And so I think Amy Beth has some personal history that with the piece that I think you might want to share. But the goal here is for me to introduce Amy Beth and just speak very briefly about the Mendelssohn and go in and hear the piece through. It runs about 30 minutes, and and it doesn't really stop between movements. So here's a case, unlike some of the other presentations we've done, where we will not stop between movements and chat. We'll just play the whole thing. The chat will be open, and Amy Beth and I make comments. And as Jamie is saying, try and go for the Q&A if you have questions, and I will do my best to answer them on the fly. If not, we'll do more of that when we stop. So then we'll have about not quite half an hour, maybe say 20 minutes afterwards to go ahead and talk. But if the talk goes on, that's okay too. So without further ado, let me introduce our incredible violinist, who's not only a great artist and a wonderful teacher, but a very close friend. So Amy Beth has been acclaimed by the Washington Post. Intelligence and emotional generosity, unerring sense of line, and gift for highlighting important themes. She brought passionate intensity to a program of disparate works from the Franck Sonata to Corigliano with Bach as well. Her vigorous reading of a soaring solo passage in the Corigliano had members of the audience quietly craning their neck forward as if in hope of bathing a little deeper in her exceptionally warm tone. Amy Beth performed with the National Symphony, made her debut performing the Tchaikovsky Concerto, a slight little piece, to debut at age 15, considered one of the greats and one of the most difficult as well. Graduated from the Paris Conservatory, and has studied with incredible teachers such as Gérard Poulet of the Paris Conservatory, Jody Gatwood, the National Philharmonic, and Patricia Hurd. Her students are winning awards all over the place, such as the Menuhin and Boris Goldstein competition, and Amy Beth is on faculty at the San Francisco Conservatory. So I would say warm round of applause, but that doesn't work, but we can just do this. And welcome to Amy Beth. It's great to
Thank,
see you.
thank you so much, Jed. It's great to be here.
Um, maybe if you want to just start quickly with your anecdote about how long you've been playing this piece or not, and why, and then maybe we'll jump in and start the music. Okay.
Yeah. So I have been playing this piece since I was about 15. So I started learning it in Paris with Monsieur Poulet, and he was very, very picky about every aspect of it. I think it was very dear to his heart, as it is to many of us. And when he taught it, he had a very meticulous way of teaching it. So that experience of training with him was really challenging for me, and it was wrought with a lot of feelings, trying to, get to this level of expectation that was in front of me. And I loved the concerto, of course. I don't think there's a violinist who doesn't love the
Hmm.
concerto.
Or an
Um,
audience member, right?
it's so beautiful,
Yeah.
and there's definitely a moment in your heart when you start it where you feel as if you've arrived at this gorgeous place in your training because you're able to finally hear yourself playing this. And
Mm.
I had that feeling, I think, as so many people do. And then Even though I proceeded to play many, many concerti with orchestra after that, I somehow hesitated at performing the Mendelssohn. I think because the training was so rigorous and it was so difficult for me emotionally to get it to where I wanted it to be. And there was a point where I realized that some of that was just me needing to evolve more as a person, and become more broad-minded, maybe have a family, maybe understand myself a little bit better.
Sure.
And I had put it off. And then I had a conversation with Jed here, where he said, "Why don't you play the Mendelssohn Concerto?" And I said, I don't know that I'm ready to play it the way that I want to play it. And you looked at me straight in the eyes and you said, "You're meant to play this concerto. It would be so beautiful." And then that really sat with me in the most beautiful way. And I went home and those words were just ringing in my ears. And then from that moment, anybody who offered me the opportunity to play it, I just accepted with a big smile on my face. And I just remembered your words. And it was a really big full circle moment for me to then perform it with you, because I think without somebody really taking the time to see me as a person and say, "I think everybody needs to hear your version of this," I
Yeah.
don't know that I would have had the faith to do it and to have that confidence to do it. So I have you to thank for that.
Well, that's nice. I didn't even know. But now, the
True.
the performance we're going to hear is from December of 2014. This was not the first time you played it with orchestra, was it, or was it?
No, no,
Yeah.
it was
So
not.
yeah,
But it's the first and only time that you and I have played it, and I
this
just
is true, and we'll have to change that at some point.
we
All right,
should.
let's get to playing the piece because I think we've gotten everyone's anticipation. So as we said, this is a piece that runs about half an hour. There's no break between movements. You'll hear at the end of a first movement, there's a low, not low, there's a bassoon note that hangs on. It's a B. You finish an E, and all of a sudden the fifth is just hanging on, suspended. And the woodwinds do this little cascading figure. And then we're in this beautiful lullaby of a second movement. We'll put that in the chat so you know where we are. And then at the end of the second movement, there's the briefest of pauses. I think he writes a taka, and then you have this incredible transition. It's like a recitative, which is what happens in opera when people are sort of talking, singing, but it's unbelievably beautiful, and that launches the third movement. There are people to say that Mendelssohn was a conservative composer, and that's only because he wrote in the forms of that he inherited compared to Liszt, let's say, or Wagner. But he was totally innovative. This piece has so many innovations, like no stop between the movements whatsoever. That had not been done all the way straight through in a concerto. Um, Usually the cadenza comes at the end of the first movement. That's the big solo for violin. This happens in the middle as the development section, and it's extremely exciting. So, there are innovations after innovations. The orchestration is absolutely effervescent. It's an incredible piece, one of my all-time favorites, and delighted to be able to share Amy Beth's interpretation of it with you from our concert together in December of 2014. And now if I can push the right buttons, we will be sharing this, and fingers crossed all will be well. So sit back and enjoy. Uh, don't be afraid to ask any questions in the chat. If we don't get to them while the piece is going on, we will get to them for sure afterwards. Okay, here we go. Okay. Wow, what a great performance, Amy Beth. That was
You
just
too.
exquisite. I want to turn right away to, we have a question in the question and answer. Samira Phillips asked, Amy Beth, I seem to remember you might have been using a particular violin that you were testing out. In any case, it's a lovely instrument. I'm wondering what it is.
That violin was a violin which was on loan to me, and it was just it was a beautiful antique Italian violin from a shop in Bethesda. So they have always been very kind to me, and for special performances, they see what they have and then they pick whatever they think would be best, and I come in and try things out. And so I don't think it was a specific name, but it was an old Italian instrument. It was really a joy to play on that violin.
Mhm, mhm. Are you still in touch? Is this Potter's? Is that who it is? Yeah, are you
Mhm.
still in touch with them?
Yes, very much, because
Good.
they're still helping with bow purchases for me and also for Ava. They've been helping with her too. So I think we'll probably be in touch forever.
That's great.
Mhm.
So there's some nice comments here in the chat. Bravo, bravo. It was a great match for you in this piece. Uh, Lisa Purvis, to others, thank you for bringing joy to many. This is lovely to see and hear. Yeah, I mean, one of the many things that I loved about your performance here is that it was old timey in the best sense of the word. The tone was warm and it pulls you in. You weren't trying to force it out to the audience. You really, it projected beautifully. It sung, there was no, it's not like it was quiet. It's just the energy was such that, you brought everyone into this fantastic sphere. And it was so different from when you played the Nielsen, which is a kind of, you know,
Mhm.
in your face, and you did that too. It's the range of your artistry is really impressive. And, there's nothing more exciting than hearing the Mendelssohn played with exquisite attention to detail, where you're riding these sort of amorous waves of
Mm.
of affection and emotion and sensuality and color. And you like to talk a lot about spinning the tone. Singers do. Do you want to comment on any or all of that I just threw out there?
Yeah, I think that thank you so much. I really appreciate what you just said. And I did, spend so much of my practice on trying to get those details, those little corners and nooks and crannies, as I call them, in my work, to be exactly pointed in the right way. Because I think it's in those tiny corners between notes, and how you treat a rest or how you transition, that really matter to the audience. It kind of helps them to feel more connected with what you're thinking or feeling. And so often they take the most deliberate practice to understand how it is that you should treat those smaller spots, which I think bring the intimacy into the room. No matter how big the room is, it might feel like a living room if you spend enough time on it. And it is very labor intensive, but it's also very gratifying.
Hmm.
I think the Mendelssohn offers so many opportunities to try to balance between classical playing and then to allow yourself the luxury of romanticism where when it's evident, when it's there.
Hmm. Hmm.
And one of the things I actually struggled with when I was studying it in Paris was that my teacher at the time was very against any sort of glissando or sliding of any sort, and it didn't
Mm.
matter what composer it was either, which was interesting, because you could be playing Brahms and he still didn't want to hear that.
You went
And
to
I
the violin, and I thought you were going to demonstrate. Could you show us a passage playing once without glissando, without sliding? It comes from glisse to glide, and once with
Sure.
glissando.
So if I start the opening, which is rather treacherous, but I'm going to try it anyhow. If I try to do it without sliding, right? So that's me trying to not slide at all.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oop, give
We
me
hear
one.
you.
Oh, I lost the screen for a second. And then if I allow myself the luxury of being more of a singer, I guess, because to me it's more vocal. Then you can see, you hear a little bit more of the passage of my fingers, and there's kind of singing in longer lines. So that kind of decision, I think, was something I had to really think through on my own post conservatory so that I didn't have anybody dictating to me that I needed to be classical and clean and completely free of any mechanical sound, because that's really how he wanted it. I didn't have that anymore, so I had to decide where I wanted to show that kind of vocal sound and where I wanted it to be more clean. So, certainly in passage work like this, that kind of passage work, you're going to be very, very, very nitpicky and clean, everything kind of polished around the edges, dusting all around the notes. So it was an interesting journey for me to balance those two sides of me out, and then to really celebrate them in the context of the Mendelssohn.
So let me add a little context with this. First, I think in the end, his having pushed you to be absolutely sort of square on this. In the end, when you did want to open it up, probably made it that much in some ways. Like you had that absolute grid work down. So
Yeah.
you could draw your curves. But I would say this, that Mendelssohn wrote this piece not at the beginning of his short life. He only lived to be 38. He lived from 1809 to 1847. That's 38 years if I've done the math right. And he wrote this just when he was 36. So 45 is when it was premiered. He had been writing it for 6 years. But by this time, we had bel canto, which is an Italian opera, which literally means beautiful singing technique, where these slides were expected and where embellishment was expected. You think about especially Bellini as being the primary example, but Donizetti as well, the primary examples of this bel canto composers, and that technique which extended well into the 20th century. You hear Fritz Kreisler playing; they're sliding all over the place.
All over the
Um,
place. Yeah.
so to us, it sounds very strange to not hear that, because that's the sort of the tradition that evolved at the time, even before Mendelssohn was writing it. The other thing I want to say is when you talked about the space between notes and how much time and attention that takes. The very famous pianist Arthur Schnabel, who was Leon Fleischer's piano teacher, Leon Fleischer being the famous piano pedagogue and pianist who lived in Baltimore and taught at Peabody Conservatory for decades and decades, and played here in town and all over the world. Um, Arthur Schnabel, his teacher, said, "The notes I handle more or less as well as anyone else, but the space, the rests, the space in between, that's where the art lies." So
Yes.
it's saying exactly what you are. Yeah.
Yes, and also just keeping it so quiet in those spaces, when there are rests. And this is something that I think, when you're training at the highest level, you think about it so much, how to really quiet all of those spaces and how to dust everything off so that you are illuminating with sound, but then also enjoying the silence. That's so important. And I think it takes a lot of control. And certainly when you're on stage and your adrenaline is running high, that can be very challenging. And I think that the Mendelssohn has a lot of those challenges. There's
Hmm. Hmm.
a lot of spaces where you need to have what seems to be, an extreme amount of control with the bow to keep things clean and beautiful.
It's funny because this piece is considered, as violins trained in, for instance, many people who play in Hopkins Symphony Orchestra will come in auditioning on the Mendelssohn Concerto, and it's considered one of those pieces that, well, you don't have to have, you can get through it, you know, without the technique that's required to play some of the Paganini caprices, or let's say Sibelius Concerto or something like this, or Nielsen. And yet, to play it really well is so hard. And again, I think of a quote by Arthur Schnabel who says this about Mozart, and he says Mozart is, alas, too hard for the amateurs and too difficult for the experts. You know what I mean?
So
You know,
tricky.
yeah,
I agree with everything you just said. And it's an interesting topic, I think, in the teaching world. It has been for me many, many times, something that I've advised students about, because I think and actually Mozart I put in the same category when you're auditioning, or certainly if you're in a competition, that to win with Mozart or Mendelssohn is so entirely difficult compared to the Brahms or the Tchaikovsky or Vinyasa or something which has that kind of, guttural beauty and romanticism pouring out of it all the time. And so often I've had students come to me and say, "Well, I really want to play the Mendelssohn then, though I really love it." And I said, "Well, that's why you should play it then. You should
right,
definitely
right,
play
right.
it." But it is so hard uh, to play it at the professional level. And in fact, I think when you do, and this is kind of a tough thing, I think, for students, especially, but also for adults, if you play it at the highest level, people think it's easy. And
Uh,
you have to congratulate yourself somewhere inside your own heart and say, wow, I made them feel like it was
yeah,
easy.
exactly,
Perfect.
exactly.
Whereas
So
if you're playing the Paganini, that's really not your job. It's not to convince them that it's easy. It's to show them how beautifully difficult it is, and how fantastic a violin can sound when it's utilizing all of its many tricks, right? But the Mendelssohn is, oh, it's got so much difficulty in it. But I think when it's played really beautifully, you hear just the writing. You don't hear how
you're the
difficult.
writing, exactly, because the writing is so much. No, I mean Paganini's great and so on. It's fun, but the Mendelssohn is, is just an incredible work of art, and it,
Mhm.
it has so many emotions, and it takes you to so many different places that when it's played really well, you're drawn into the piece. When you were playing the second theme, which is the quieter, more lyrical section in major for the audience. Um, and it was you were just melting, and you were able to bring it in and slow it down. And the danger is, that you can never come back, right? I mean, you
Yes,
can get into a
it's
place where
over.
it's like, okay, this is, and you take it to the edge of something that becomes incoherent, but you want to be just this side of it. And of course you've got to risk and flirt with that disaster. I mean, again, uh, I believe Leon Fleischer, talking about Leonard Bernstein, said he always took us to the edge of the abyss, and
Right.
sometimes you fell in there with him, but didn't you want to know what it looked like anyway? I feel you took us, in, and you flirted with that, you let it come to its just the moment of stillness where, and then it took us on, and that's so hard to do. It's nothing that you can say, well, I've practiced that and I've got it right 20 times, so it'll be fine in the concert. It's just you've got to rediscover that moment in that way for that moment, right? We have
Yeah.
a question here. Is it very difficult to play the third movement with the orchestra, since so many of the rhythms are played in unison with the orchestra and it is so fast? Great question.
I think yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Because in fact, when I'm playing, and I remembered it as I was watching, it's such a pleasure to rewatch the performance, because um, it just reminds me of so many great moments that we've had together on stage. But
Hmm.
inside of the third movement, there are these passages in the solo part, which are basically running 16th notes. And then inside the orchestra part, you're hearing dotted rhythms. And
Hmm.
so to really do this with those two parts and to have them stable is tricky. And especially if the dotted rhythms are moving from section to section. So
Right, right, right.
there's a lot of calm listening going on. And I remember, being at home, what I did to prepare for that was I actually played the orchestra part and recorded it. And then I played with the recording so that I could get the sensation of having to fit inside of that beautiful puzzle that
and
Mendelssohn
and then
showed.
you knew that if you were having a hard time playing with yourself, that there's only so mad you could be at the orchestra, right?
Right. And just for anybody who's wondering, which what's she talking about? That part, right?
Right.
That part has so much moving 16th note action. and you really want to be at a specific tempo. And of course, you can practice it with a metronome, but it's not the same as putting it with
And
people.
with against that, the orchestra is doing dim dum ba dum
That's right, the
dim bum
dotted rhythm.
So to make those, man, you don't have orchestra people, and sound, does not does not travel at the speed of light. So to get everyone sort of, you know, aligned with that, it's tricky. Um, and when it does go, and I think it went, quite well with us, even with a, probably a bigger orchestra than might be advised, for the Mendelssohn Concerto, because we want everyone to have the experience of getting to play with you and getting to play the piece. Um, when it does work, it's just it's so exciting, and you can probably hear us in the audience just hungering for the chance to get to play live again, because this pandemic has been so hard on those of us who perform
It
all
really,
the time.
yeah,
And
definitely.
also for I have to say, for the members of the Hopkins Symphony Orchestra, we've had two rehearsals now where they allow us quartets plus me, 5 people maximum in, and
Mm.
so we've had 3 groups of that with the students only, and it's been such a pleasure to just get to make music with people together, even if we're, you know 10 feet apart or whatever it is. We're more than 6 feet apart. We do that. So
Well,
yeah.
and
Other
just
questions for Amy Beth in the Q&A you want to put? Because we're close to wrapping up, but so if you have other questions, grab them now. And no question is too silly, or don't think, well, I shouldn't ask this, because it's probably a great question. So what uh, what 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 are you looking to playing when we come out of this? What got put on hold that you're going to look to reinvigorate right away? What repertoire is
uh,
coming up?
I played a recital with Corey McVicker, who also was in Baltimore for a very
Sure,
long time,
sure.
before all of this happened, and we had talked about playing together again. It was a beautiful church in San Francisco. It was a great,
Does
great
he live
recital.
now in San Francisco too,
Hmm?
Corey? Does Corey live in San Francisco?
Yes, he
Oh,
lives
that's great.
within walking distance of me, so we visit, and he's one of my closest friends. So
Hmm.
we
Great
had
pianist, great
such
pianist.
a beautiful time preparing that, and so I'm really hoping that we get the chance to do that again with a different program and elaborate a little bit on what we had planned before, maybe even make it a little bit better. Um, and I think we're both just anxious to get back to playing together. And in fact, he was the one who helped me find my first vaccine appointment, which we had on the same day, and we have our second one together in a couple of weeks.
Oh,
So
congratulations.
it
Great.
might be that our rehearsing can start again quicker than I thought.
You could both still wear masks. It's okay, and be a little further apart than you ordinarily
Think
would. Yeah,
so,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Good,
yeah.
good. Can you remind what pieces we did? The Nielsen, we did the Mendelssohn at Hopkins. What did we do? Any of the other? I know we did some other concertos elsewhere. I want to say we did the Brahms um, uh, in New Jersey,
So we did the Barber,
the
the
Barber, right,
Nielsen,
in New Jersey. Hmm.
the Mendelssohn, Havanez we did together,
Yep,
Sanson.
on that program, right? Yeah,
I think we did the Barber and Havanez all in one concert, which was
yeah, we did. Yeah, we did.
challenging and beautiful. It was a beautiful concert, as I remember. I remember just feeling like it was just a wonderful experience to play those two works together. So I have really good memories about that.
That was a curious experience, because I asked you late to play the Avanes because we were supposed to do the John Adams Chamber Symphony, and we got the parts, and then they required a specific 1992 synth. I see your question to it. We'll get to that, and you had to have the exact right software and hardware to play this piece. And I asked on all the orchestra members, and people in Atlanta said, somebody said, "Oh my God, we had to like reprogram the." It was one of these things where it was just not doable, and so
Yeah.
we had to pull the piece. And I said, Amy Beth, could you I'm looking for a piece. What do you think about throwing this in there? And you said, sure, I'll play it. You're always so helpful in that way. We've got a
Um,
great question
right.
here. Regarding tempo, is it dictated by the composer, piece, and or conductor, soloist, and how you might interact? And the answer to that is yes. it's indicated it's indicated by the composer. Sometimes they put metronome markings, but every composer will tell you don't pay too much attention to the metronome markings. The live ones and the dead ones all said that.
Mhm.
And even if not, it'll say like allegro molto. This one actually had two different markings. The first movement, allegro con molto appassionato, and the other one was allegro con fuoco or something. He changed his mind,
Mhm.
and so one means passionately spirited tempo, and the other's a spirited tempo with fire. Um, and so they give you indications, and then depending upon the temperament of the soloist, and some concertos, like if it's Paganini, the soloist is just going to tell you what tempo they do. But a
Yeah.
piece like the Mendelssohn, mostly the soloist tells you what they do, and there's some interaction with the conductor. A piece like the Beethoven and the Brahms, which is even more symphonic, that'll be more collaborative.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah, and then and then the other answer is, and I've seen this borne out, you know, whoever has the bigger reputation calls the tempo. I mean, there's a famous story with Horowitz playing with do I have this right? Horowitz was Toscanini's son-in-law, and I mean, there were big, and Stravinsky and Nijinsky for ballet, fights over tempos, so it's a great question, and one that, as you can see, there's no definitive answer, um, unless one of the people's a jerk, then there's a definitive answer.
Well, I know in working with you and with many other conductors, there comes a point where I always get an email or a text message or something which says, "Can you please inform me as to your tempos on these movements?" Because they're starting rehearsals with the orchestra. So I remember distinctly you asking me, not about the Mendelssohn, but I remember you asking me about the Barber
Mhm.
and the third movement, which is so hard that it caused a lawsuit, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay. So I remember you saying, "Can you tell me what your tempo is?" And I gave you a tempo which was quite fast. And you wrote me back and you said, "That's a good tempo. Is there any way that you would be willing to try the actual printed tempo? Because not many people do that." And then I wrote you back some quippy response, which was nice. I laughed and I said, "Well, there's a reason why a lot of people don't do that."
I
And,
know.
and you said, "Would you mind trying? I think it might be fun." And I thought about it. And it's just the kind of person I am. I went, "You know what? I got 2 weeks to try that." So I really worked hard to see if I could get up to that tempo. And in the end, I surprised myself and I was actually a little faster. But there
Hmm.
is there is that little there is that collaborative nudge or two about, I wonder what we can wrangle together to really bring this alive with the people that we have, right? Because it's your orchestra and it's you and it's me. So it's just all of us together. It's a unique group of people every time. And so it deserves separate conversations, even if we were playing it the same concerto, you and I together. If it's different groups or if it's different personnel, then there's a separate conversation that should happen each time, I
I mean,
think.
I've taken pieces on tour where there were 10 performances, and with the soloist, it's like, you know, coming into the concert, I'm feeling a little more expansive tonight. What do you think? Or, I mean, or sometimes you don't even have the conversation, and that's really nice. It's great to have repeat performances. And of course, whatever happens, whatever you plan, then you get into concert and it's something else. Not because you have nerves and things, become out of control, but because the adrenaline and this sort of adrenaline response and the audience takes you to places because the audience is listening, and by their sort of listening and paying attention to what we do, you're kind of shaping that performance with us. It's not
Yeah.
just us. It's not a one-way street, like a film where you can watch the same film over and over again. Julia Roberts can say that line exactly the same way, but not true. Different audience, we feel the room feels different and we're responding. So then there's that moment where you plan everything, you rehearse everything, you get into concert, and all of a sudden something else is going on. You look at each other, it's like, let's do it. You know what I mean? And that's when it's really fun.
That actually happened in the end of the Mendelssohn that we just heard. And it was one of the things I wanted to mention. Maybe we can think about this as part of the end of our time together today. But I, the last page of the Mendelssohn, which is so joyous, so triumphant,
Hmm.
I was having such a good time by then. And I've told this to a few of my students. If you work hard enough and you're with the right people and you feel utter joy while you're playing, so that you have to be fully relaxed, something occurred to me. The winds did something, and I thought of a new bowing and
Mm.
I threw it in. It just happened. And I remember having this euphoric reaction to that for myself while I was playing, like, wow, I just came, like my ear told me to do something and I just did it. And I,
Hmm.
I think that we have to get to a point in our performing where we are open to those things happening, where we're fluid enough and trusting enough of our training and of our artistry that we can allow for that to happen spontaneously in front of a whole bunch of people.
I mean, I always say
But
that
it's a beautiful moment.
you don't work that hard for perfection. Perfection is a boring goal. You work that hard for something much more meta than perfection, which is to go to a place you didn't know existed before, you
Yes,
know?
and with those people, with the people
Yeah,
that happened
yeah.
to be with, because they inspired me. It was something that the Winds did, and I watched it. I haven't thought about it in a long time, but I watched it right when we watched it together on Zoom right now, and I saw it happen, and I remembered it.
Nice.
And it's a nice memory, and it's a good reminder. A great violinist I know whose name is Danny Koo advised all of my students recently. He said, once you have something and you've got the shifts and you have all the mechanics down, don't deaden it. Don't practice it to death.
Mm,
Do the other things, but leave that golden so that you can have it with everyone else. It's to share, right? So if we really just hit it too many times, there's something about it that becomes not so golden and new to us anymore. And we have to keep everything fresh and new. So I thought that was such a great thing that he told
mm-hmm,
them,
mm-hmm,
because so often you hear teachers saying to, practice, practice, practice. But what he was saying was, once you have it, you have to learn to trust that, and
mm-hmm.
then to be willing to be free with it and do what your body wants to do, what your ear tells it to do. And it was a really beautiful message, I think, for everybody that
The
day.
great American poet William Stafford, who died, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe more now, said, when somebody said, how do you know when to stop fussing with a poem? And he said, the poem is like a drawer of photographs, and I move them around, and I move them, and this one calls me to do this, and then I'm shuffling them, and then taking one out, and then at a certain point my hands are doing this, and then I don't feel nothing's calling on me to change it, and then I have to take my hands away. I think that's such a beautiful metaphor. We've got a great question, and this I think will have to be our last one because we are way over. But from a 16-year-old violinist is how the anonymous attendee writes. What is your advice for me?
Well, if you're playing the Mendelssohn Concerto, my advice to you is to do a lot of listening and a lot of score study to appreciate Mendelssohn's writing. Because I think that we never play better than when we appreciate the composer's writing.
Mm,
There's so much magical symmetry in the writing. And me studying the score made such a difference to my playing, because I just gained a very sincere love for the writing that he put for everybody out there.
mm,
It's so miraculous what he's done, and you can't really see it just off of the page, and we tend to get very obsessed with the octaves, or with the ricochet and the cadenza. I mean, there's so many violinistic issues that we have to sort out. But I think what people tend to not do enough, and especially a 16-year-old can do this very easily, you can go and find the score. It's free, it's on IMSLP, so that you can really enjoy the score and understand the writing, and then listen to a recording while looking at the score. And then beyond that, to listen to other works by Mendelssohn, symphonic
mm,
works by Mendelssohn. There's so many things that you can gain from understanding the composer and what special offerings they have
mm.
unique to other composers, so that you can make some decisions which really honor them in a way which is a little bit different than when you play another composer. So that's what I would recommend that you do.
Yeah, great advice. Amy Beth, I can't tell you how much fun it's been visiting with you and revisiting this performance.
Great to see
And
you, Jen.
yeah, it's been too long, and we'll have to have you come back and do something with us soon. That would be
I
great.
hope so.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Wow. So again, a big round of applause for Amy Beth and her beautiful performance, and thank you for sharing, really with in detail, and also quite personally, your odyssey with this piece and who you are as an artist, as an
Thank you,
artist.
Jen.
We really appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I just want to take a moment to thank both of you for your time and talent. And I want to thank our wonderful audience for joining us this evening. You're
Hmm.
wonderful. You will receive a recording of this program along with some resources tomorrow. That is not a pillow, that's a dog. I don't know how that happened. I didn't even see it happen. Working from home, so fun. This was delightful. And I can see in the comments, everyone loved it. Job well done. Thank you for your time. And thank you for the treasure of your music.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Jamie. It was great to be here. Thanks.